Behind every undeniable brand are strategies most people never see. Until now. Each week, we're ripping open the playbooks of world-class innovators who've built massive communities from scratch. Real people, real results, real systems you can implement today. I'm Kendall LeJeune, and this is Tribe Tracks. Joining us on the show today is Kristen Hartnagel. As a founding member of a brand builders group, the force behind powerhouse personal brands like Lewis Howes and Marie Forleo, Kristen is about to pull back the curtain on what really drives explosive brand growth. With over 4,000 hours of brand strategy work and a track record of launching multiple 7- and 8-figure startups, she's the secret weapon behind New York Times bestselling authors and some of the highest paid speakers in the industry. As founder of Evolve Now Coaching, Kristen has an uncanny ability to help leaders break through their belief barriers and transform into unstoppable forces. Whether you're just starting your brand journey or ready to scale to new heights, today's episode is packed with insider strategies that most brand consultants won't share. When she's not transforming personal brands, you'll find her commanding stages as a keynote speaker or rocking out with her all-female band, The Six Pack. Please welcome Kristen Hartnagel. Kristen, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
I am great. And Kendall, I am so happy to have the opportunity to talk with you again.
Oh gosh, I'm so excited. When I first set out to create this podcast and I started thinking of who am I going to have on to talk about brand, one of the brand architects that came to mind obviously was you. So I can't wait to jump right in and talk about personal brand. So for those that may be listening to this or not quite familiar with the work that you do or who you are, can you give us a little bit of a backstory? What do you do and how did you get to where you are today?
Absolutely. So I joined Brand Builders Group before they even started. So I'm a founding team member and we have been together for almost like 6.5 years now. And it's been quite a ride of helping everybody from somebody who has an idea for what they want to do with a business to full-fledged celebrities who are just trying to take their business to the next level, and everything in between. So it's been a wonderful journey, and we just couldn't have imagined being as successful as it is. It has bloomed beyond what we thought possible, and it's been so exciting to help people.
That is remarkable. Now, Brand Builders is behind some really huge names that many of our listeners will recognize. Could you give us like a short list of some of the people that Brand Builders works with?
Absolutely. In the influencer space, there would be people like Lewis Howes, Mylett, Amy Porterfield, Jenna Kutcher, so many. In the real estate space, because you're involved with a lot of those people, we've been working with people from Keller Williams, people from EX, even like the CEOs and the founders of some of those companies. And a lot of them are looking to build a personal brand to take their business to the next level or to attract agents or just develop their exposure plays so that they can become the go-to person in their space.
Wow, that is remarkable. Talk about a star-studded roster. That's very cool. Very cool. So for people that are listening to this, that they may not be familiar with the term personal brand, or maybe they've heard it. I think it's now considered a buzzword. I think that there's so many people that have so many different definitions. What's your definition of personal brand?
I love that you are asking this because you're right. About 10, 12 years ago, the notion of personal branding felt a little bit off-putting. It was like, isn't that just for the Kardashian wannabes who just want to make money from being who they are? And it's come a long way. It really is all about, to me, the definition of a personal brand is the formalization and the digitization of your reputation. We can't afford to be the best kept secret if we want to attract the right fit people. So it is, how do I get in front of the people who need to know that this is who I am and who I serve and how I do that?
That's beautiful. And for those that may think a personal brand, isn't that just like colors and a logo and a website? What all encompasses What does personal brand encompass when you're talking about the digitization of a reputation?
Yeah, so it is everything that is external facing that can only be created when you have internal clarity on your messaging. So we are talking about the words you use in emails, the copy you have on websites, where it's way beyond what you would think of as branding. Branding typically is like colors and brand style guidelines that includes your font family and things like that. But because we're talking about who you are, we know we did this study called Trends in Personal Branding, and it revealed that people don't want to do business with companies anymore if they don't know anybody involved in the company. It's we used to do business with companies because the company had a reputation. But anymore, if we can't figure out who the leaders are or who some key players are, and if their values align with our values, then we're going to go with a company who is out there and vulnerable and who we can tell has values that align with our values.
That is huge. That is huge. And let's just say someone has a company, they might be like a one-man show or a one-woman show, and they don't really have a ton of employees, and they might be thinking personal branding or branding in general, that's for the big guys. What would you say to that person?
Gosh, I would say almost all of our clients are entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, CEOs of their businesses. And I would say that we know more and more companies who are understanding this trend in personal branding, and they're actually looking for people within their organization that they can help establish thought leadership, because they know that individual can cast a net that the company just can't cast. But if you're talking about why would an individual feel like a personal brand would be a fit for them, it's really a matter of how do people know about you? You're responsible for the results that you provide, but results times reach equals reputation. So even if you have the best service or are the best at what you do on the planet, if nobody knows about you, they can't do business with you. It's not enough just to be the best. It has to be out there. People have to know about you. And what they know about you has to be something that resonates like an antenna and a frequency that they can tune into and feel, oh my gosh, you are my person. And if we're not doing that with intention, here's the thing about a reputation. You have one that is either being formed unintentionally or you are intentionally shaping what people think of when they think of you.
Yeah. Oh, that is so good. That is so good. Now, one of the things that came up in my mind while you were walking us through that was I see lots of times people mixing up the term brand and marketing. So, can you talk a little bit about what is the difference in your mind between marketing and branding?
Sure. So we always start with who are you being called to serve? I know Simon Sinek is famous for start with why, but
Yeah.
we really want to take a step back and start with who, because when it is clear who you're being called to serve, then you can figure out what problem do they have that you solve. And so we do a lot of work with clients to reduce that to the one word problem. So to answer your question, marketing is here I am, here's what I do, don't you want to work with me? And branding is like being that light on a lighthouse that is saying, here is who I am, to attract the people because the messaging syncs up. If we can't articulate the problem that you solve, if you're not good, if you can't answer the question, what problem do you solve? Then how are the people who are trying to figure out if they should work with you, how will they know that you're the right fit? So we want to work with clients to be able to articulate that in all of their external facing messaging.
That's so good. That's so good. So, piggybacking on that a little bit, when you say start with who, I think that's beautiful. For someone that may think, isn't the goal to get as many people as possible? Can you talk about the
Mm.
differences? 'Cause that is a little bit of a different shift that we've seen evolve over the years. And it's no longer about the huge net, but the really specific, like attracting your people. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I can, and it is a very important mindset shift to make, because when you're doing business and you're so excited about the solution that you provide, our go-to mindset is that everybody in the world could use this. Everybody is my audience. Everybody could be my client and should be my client. And I love that enthusiasm and confidence, but the reality is in the messaging. We cannot try to appeal to everybody. And you've heard this before. When we try to appeal to everybody, we end up appealing to nobody. And that is because our tendency is to not want to alienate anybody. So we talk in generalities. When we talk in generalities, it goes over people's head. And so if you're saying, I can help everybody, people can't see themselves in that. So when we start with who, we're really forcing you to become uncomfortable and get it down to, we want to go from the world to a core target audience to a single human avatar. And when you get that dialed in on the exact person you want to serve and you make your messaging connect with that person, the thing is, people can feel that and they see themselves. Kendall, when you hear a story, your brain, psychologically, you're playing that story as if it's happening to you. You know this is true because when you watch a movie, your heart beats faster and your palms get sweaty. We interpret what we're getting as if it's happening to us. What we are doing that is shooting ourselves in the foot, and we're doing it subconsciously, not intentionally, is trying to appeal to everybody. So that general stuff isn't making me feel like I'm in that movie at all. But if you can get really clear on the problem you solve and you're able to give words to how it feels to have that problem, then that avatar is going to go, oh my God, how did you know? It's like you were a fly on the wall. You climbed inside my head and my heart. How did you know? But if we're not getting that kind of reaction, then we're staying superficial, and that does not connect with anybody.
That makes so much sense. And the C word, that big connection, that is totally just a huge goal. I think that most really ultra successful people that have successful marketing and resonate with their audience, they connect.
Yeah.
That's really at the core of it. So let's talk a little bit more about that avatar. How deep exactly do you go? Do you get it down to this is a man, this is a woman, this is a, like, how deep do you go to identify and define that avatar?
We do a lot of heavy mental lifting. It is a deep exercise, more than just the logistics, which people think of when they think of creating an avatar or a core target audience. They think of the demographics, and that's important. That's more of the logistical where and how am I going to find them. But we really want to climb into the psychographics, and that is really, what do they care about? What's keeping them up at night? And so there's a deep exercise that we do to try and narrow that down to one person. And when we say it needs to be a male or a female, it does not mean that you're not going to work with the other. We're going to ask really specific questions, not because you're saying if it's not matching this, then I don't want to work with them. It just means if we've got that person that if I had 100 more of these, 1,000 more of these, my business would be humming. Then you can't not attract those people, but you're also going to draw in people like that. So if you aim small, you miss small. So we want to get it super narrow, even to the point of it maybe feeling a little bit uncomfortable, because I definitely have clients who are like, hey, 50-50, I have 50% male and 50% female. We could make 2 avatar stories, but since it has to be a human story that we're creating, let's just pick one. Is it a male or a female that we're creating this story around? And I truly mean a story, because if you were to read this story every time you went to create content, you would be creating that content to the one person instead of reverting back to the temptation to go back to the masses and speak in general terms.
Ah, that is so good. Like, so many light bulbs are going off as you're explaining this. You mentioned psychographics. If someone, and it sounds like you at Brand Builders have a very robust process and system to get to the psychographics of an avatar. But if someone is looking to just start dipping their toe in the water and understanding how that actually works, what can they do on their own? Where do they go? What type of research can they do to start understanding what are the psychographics of their avatar?
I think the easiest thing to understand at some level, we are best positioned to serve the person we once were. And we don't know anybody better than we know ourselves. Typically, we're in a business because we came through something and we now want to help others go through that thing. And it's hard, though, to remember what was I like before I had the solution. And that is why most marketing misses, because we live in the space of the solution. So we're talking at people. There's this energetic exchange. And if I know what I know and I think you need to know it, and I show up just telling you what you need to know, that's rubbing people the wrong way. As a matter of fact, it's people are in assessment mode. They're going, do I believe that? Is that true for me? And you don't want them in assessment mode. You want to bypass that kind of logical brain and get into the emotional brain. So the first exercise would be, what was I like before I had this solution? Another way you could think of it is, who is my favorite client? Who do I absolutely love working with? And I know that I'm a great fit for them if I had 100 more or 1,000 more of this person, and describe what that person cares about, who they care about. There's a whole list, like 20 questions that we go through for the psychographics, but an easy place to start is, who were you, since we are best suited to serve a former version of ourselves? Or who do you have that you love that you would want more of? And just describe that person in your mind. And then really craft a story about that person. You want to love your avatar. You just want to love them so deeply.
Back of your hand, right?
Yeah.
You know them like the back of your hand. That is so good. That is so good. What do you believe are some of the most common misconceptions that people have around personal branding?
I think that people do really good things, right things, but in the wrong order. So I would say that typically when somebody's starting a business or they're thinking about expanding their business, their first inclination is, I need to build a website or I need to improve my website. But if you're doing that before you know who you're being called to serve and what problem you solve for that person, then it's almost like you're investing money in a very expensive billboard that is going to miss the mark. So we are a strategy company. We want to really help people understand the strategy first, then copy. Copy is it's the psychology of influence. It's moving people through a decision-making process without ever feeling salesy. So it's strategy first, then copy, then design. How should it look? How should it flow? How should it operate? How should it function? Then you want to hire somebody to build it for you. I can't tell you how many web designers have said, Kristen, I wish every person that came to work with me has worked with you first, because they say to me, I want to build a website. And I say, okay, who is this for? And they're like, I don't know. What words do you want? I don't know. So we really want you to get clear on, why are we trying to connect with the heart and the mind of the who before we even write the copy, before we do the design. And that goes for so many things. You hear all you need to be successful is to grow your Instagram to 10,000. That's a fraction, a facet of everything that needs to be done. So we want people to do the right things, but in the right order. And so we think that you can make millions without millions of followers. And so we definitely respect and honor social media, but it is not necessary for you to have a multi-million-dollar business. It's going to be the icing on the cake if we do the other parts right.
Gosh, so good. So let's dig into how someone goes about defining what their personal brand is. What would you advise someone on that process? What does that look like?
Yeah, we have a process. It starts with finding your brand DNA. And within the Finding Your Brand DNA series of exercises, or we would call that part of our curriculum, we do start with finding that avatar story. And then once we're clear on the who, we want to then isolate, of all the problems you solve, because you solve a lot of problems, what is the one word problem that we're going to narrow this down to that becomes the foundation? The problem that we identify is what your avatar is aware of. But what causes that problem is beyond their understanding. And so have you ever heard that you can't sell something to somebody that you know they need if they don't know they need it? That's what this is. If you gave words to the problem, they'd lean in. But if you gave words to the cause, they may scratch their head. It's if I were a life coach and I said, I solve the problem of insecurity by giving people a leg up on confidence. They might identify, yeah, I'm a little insecure, but if I were to talk about unworthiness, they may go, I feel worthy. But there's an underlying unworthiness that we really need to unpack. And then if I solve unworthiness, that insecurity evaporates, it goes away. So we want to delve into what is the problem you solve and what is the cause of that problem and how to message that. Then you have a uniqueness. And we need to determine the one word uniqueness, which is the answer to the question, why you over anybody else in your space? And it's not so much what is unique about you, it's what is unique about the way you solve the problem. Because there's a lot of competitors out there who are saying that they can solve the same problem that you solve. So we need to understand, how do we message the why you over anybody else in your space? And it can't be that you're better than, because not everybody can be better than. It's what's unique. What's the unique way that you do that? What's the vehicle? What's your superpower? What do you bring to the table that nobody else does? And a lot of people have a hard time answering that. Then we want to go through, go ahead.
Sorry, but I was going to ask, how do you help people to answer? Oh, you're good. So how do you help people to answer, what is my superpower? What makes me unique?
There is another deep set of questions that we go through. A lot of this is just pulling out of people what's been floating around in thought soup to have them really focus on it and go, oh my gosh, that's it. When we land on it, it'll give you the goosies. It'll be that thing that you're like, oh, that's it. But just because it doesn't mean you can verbalize it. So it does take this kind of pulling out. Some of the questions are like, if you thought of all of the payoffs, all of the outcomes that people would get from working with you, and you put them in a blender, like what would that one encapsulation of all those payoffs be? That's one way to think about your uniqueness. Your uniqueness is, in essence, the one word solution to the one word problem. It has to triangulate with the message. So the next thing I was going to talk about is, how do you tell your avatar to solve that problem? And so that's the message. The problem, the uniqueness, and the message all have to, they're like legs on a three-legged stool. If they're not in balance, then we're going to be off. So that uniqueness is a tough one to come up with, but it's something that people light up about when they find it.
Oh, that is such a cool process. Now, if someone's listening to this and they're like, I've not really thought about who I'm helping. I'm just in business to make money. My business is very transactional. Maybe they're not like a life coach, but maybe they have a very transactional type of business. Maybe it's real estate or something like that. How would you advise those people to look past the money piece of it and say, okay, how do I start figuring out what it is that I do?
I think they could ask themselves the question, who would you rather work with? If you were in need of an agent, would you rather work with somebody who treats you like a transaction? And you can feel that kind of transactional dynamic versus somebody who really cares about what's best for you as a buyer or a seller. And that all comes down to service. Are you able to portray that you are in it for those people that you're being called to serve? And if not, if you are just trying to crunch those numbers and be transactional, then it's a numbers game for you. And that's okay. It's just that people will feel like a number.
Yeah, that is fantastic insight. So do you think everyone who is in business, who is an entrepreneur, should have a personal brand?
I believe everyone who is in business for themselves already has a personal brand. It is either that it is unintentionally shaping you, or you are intentionally shaping it. So you have a personal brand. Your personal brand is what people think of when they think of you. So if you're not doing all you can to dive deep into, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? How do I want people to feel me? Then they're just getting what's out there already. Because you can guarantee if somebody's going to do business with you, they're Googling you. What are they finding? Have you ever Googled yourself? Do you know what people are seeing when they find you? And that should be something that you intentionally craft, not manipulate. It's not about manipulating the awareness of people. It's about really getting clear on how you show up so that your character shines through. And people who want to align with what's important to you are going to find you more easily when you do it the right way.
Yeah. So there are a lot of people that I talk with about this topic of personal branding. And some of the answers I get from some people are, look, I'm not looking to be an influencer. I don't want to do dances on TikTok or have a podcast or anything like that. And they struggle to feel comfortable with putting themselves out there. That's a common phrase that I hear. I don't want to put myself out there. I'm not a very public person. What would you say to those people?
I would say the reason people shy away from being out there is because they don't know how to do that effectively. And so if they're saying that, hey, I really don't want to share a post about what I had for breakfast, then they're missing the opportunities that are there in order to put your best foot forward. Why does anybody do any kind of marketing? It is because we need attention. We need exposure. We need people to find who we are. And so I don't suggest that we need to have thousands and thousands of followers. We just need to know how to put out the content that really speaks to the heart and mind of the person that you are trying to do business with. So we have a formula for posting that really helps people feel good about the content that they're putting out there. And the content that you're putting out there should be an answer to a question that is being asked. If you're of value, if your content is truly serving somebody, it's because there is a solution in that content that people are going to be so grateful to have. And so I think the people who are like, I just don't really want to show up, just aren't sure how to do it in a way that feels genuine and authentic. Another thing is they could be thinking, I don't have the bandwidth for it. And that could be a real thing. But if you could get it down to a system that felt good, then a lot of it could be delegated. And so there's just a missed opportunity to be hiding from the public that you think you're trying to serve. If we want to do business, but we're saying, I don't want to put myself out there, then who are you doing business with? And I will say this. I have a lot of clients that are in that mindset that you're describing, and they do a lot of their business through referrals. And that's great. That means that they're doing good work and they're relying on referrals. And I want to help people scale their businesses, and referrals is one great way. But let's just look at all the different pieces of the pie and pick the 2 or 3 that are really going to help move the needle for your business.
Yeah, that you actually just read my mind with that last statement, because I've also talked to several people where they're like, I like the feeling of being exclusive. And I like the idea that I'm a boutique kind of a business. And if I just put everything out there, then I feel like I might lose that. So continuing on in that vein, how would you advise those people?
There could be some financial opportunities that they're leaving on the table, because you can have few very elite or high dollar, high ticket items that you're selling that do make you that boutique offering. But are there things that you could do to draw a crowd in and serve at a smaller level that would allow you to expand that exposure and leverage that, nurture those until they become that right fit person? There's nothing wrong with wanting to serve fewer people more deeply. That's really the Brand Builders Group model. We're not trying to serve thousands and thousands of people. We want 1,000 mission-driven messengers. I'm going to say that again. We want 1,000 mission. All right, I'm going to say it again.
It's a tongue twister.
It is. We want 1,000 mission-driven messengers. And when we have those, we want to serve them more and more deeply rather than just trying to drive more people. And right now, I think we have about 900. So we're so close to that level where we want to be. So it's okay to have that elite kind of mentality, but we also want to say, how can we serve those people in new and different ways that'll allow you to scale in ways that maybe you hadn't even considered? Kendall, we talked a little bit about the first part of helping people find their brand DNA, but I wanted to continue because this is a really good point that you're talking about when they have a limited mindset about how they could be monetizing what they do. After we get clear on who you're being called to serve, the problem, the uniqueness, and the message, we want to then say, what are all the things that your avatar could buy from you? Because there's a lot of times that we just haven't thought of something that maybe could be monetized. So we have this acronym and it's called PAIDS. It's all the ways we have identified that you can make money. P stands for product, like a physical product. Do you have a book in you? Could you write a book or a journal? Or is there any merchandise? Is there anything physical? A is ads and affiliates. I is information like a course or a membership maybe. D is deals. Like, do you have a story that's so compelling you might get a book deal or a movie deal or a show or something like that? And then S is you as a service. And that really is where you're trading time for dollars. And so we want to consider all of those things. And just because somebody could buy it from you doesn't mean you want to be in that business. We want to weigh what you could be making money from with what are you most passionate about doing? What do you want to spend your time doing? And identify 2 or 3 things. One is your primary business model, but what could a secondary business model be? What could some ancillary revenue streams be? But we want to get laser focused for the first 12 months because diluted focus leads to diluted results. But then we want the 2 to 5 year vision. So I would tell you that clients that come in that have, like maybe in the real estate industry, I have several real estate clients. One is writing a book. One is speaking on stages. They know that the exposure play is super important. One has a podcast. And even if they don't want to have a podcast of their own, we want to talk about how could you go on a podcast tour for exposure? What kind of questions would you want the host to ask that give you the platform to expose your own thought leadership? Your thought leadership is your uniqueness. It's about the problem you solve. You are establishing who you are and who you want to work with when you have that really dialed in.
Oh, I love that. And it's funny because, again, you read my mind. I was about to jump to monetization. So let me ask, because I've heard this a lot as well. I've heard, Kendall, what's the ROI on building a brand, right? How do you go about answering that question?
I would answer that in, well, breaking it down. If we're talking about an agent and we say, if getting super clear on who you're being called to serve and the problem you solve for that person, if your messaging attracted even one more of those, how much does that represent for you? And so building a personal brand would more than pay for itself. In the life of an agent, typically they make enough on one house that they could more than pay for their personal branding journey. So the ROI is that attraction factor over the long haul. You will be developing thought leadership. You will be known as the go-to person for this thing that you do in a unique way to solve the problem for people. And that intellectual property, your IP, you're going to develop the way you say things, your one-liners. Thought leadership is not necessarily saying something that hasn't been said before, but it's saying it in the Kendall version, right? How does Kendall say that? And so that's not easy. It's really, there's a process for, in fact, we have 6 formulas that we would want to conceptually what you want me to know, but let's crunch it through these 6 formulas to figure out if we can come up with a really pithy, catchy, memorable way to say that thing so that people are repeating you. And when people repeat you, they're out there like your foot soldiers.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. It just lights me up to hear this. So talking about the thought leadership, because I think that's something that is a very tangible thing that not many people consider in terms of this is how I specifically explain this. And just the way that I'm saying this also is part of communicating who you are and what you do. So can you talk a little bit about, could you give us an example of one of the formulas for thought leadership?
Absolutely. I'll take a little step back because, again, I think I said earlier that You know what, because you live in the space of the solution. And so our temptation is to just, I'm going to tell you what you need to know. And that is one directional energetically. People who are hearing that are in assessment mode. Do I believe that? Is that true for me? And we don't want people in assessment mode. So what we want to do with our content is to change somebody's life. We want them to behave in a way that they wouldn't have behaved if they hadn't heard my message. So the best way to change somebody's life is to get them to think about something in a new way and then to do something as a result of what you just helped them understand. So we want a formula for that is to tell a story, make a point, teach a framework, and inspire a behavior. So that's tell a story, make a point, teach a framework, and inspire a behavior. Imagine the difference energetically. If you're just telling me what you think I need to know, that feels adversarial. It's, again, that one directional energy. And that's what most people feel in a sales conversation. They have this little bit of a wall up. We've all had that, sorry for used car salespersons, but we've had that experience where we don't like to feel sold. We all want to buy, but we don't want to feel sold. And so we want to shift from that adversarial energy to more of an experiential energy. And so just like I talked about when you watch a movie and your heart rate increases and your palms get sweaty, when you tell a story, it's like we're on the same side of the table and we're watching a movie together. And you can't argue with a movie. So storytelling allows you to put me in my imagination where I'm putting myself into that story. And then you drop the point, that thing that you wanted me to know. And boom, it's like you slipped it in there, and I'm not in assessment mode. I'm more in entertainment mode, but you got that thing that you wanted me to understand in there. And that led me to my own aha moment. There is nothing more rewarding than when you lead somebody to their own aha moment instead of clubbing them over the head with it. That's the difference between marketing and really connecting. So that formula is one way to do that. But when it comes to the point that you're trying to make, we want to ask, can it be said in a way that is either rhythmic or alliterative? Can it be inverse construction, parallel construction? Can it just be a linear line of thinking, or could it be a metaphor? I'll give you an example. I don't know if your listeners know, but one of the founders of Brand Builders Group is Rory Vaden. He is a New York Times bestselling author. His first book was Take the Stairs. And one of his runaway intellectual property one-liners is the quote, "Success is never owned, it's merely rented, but the rent is due every day." Now, that didn't just come out of his mind. He was thinking, I know that people need discipline. I know that people get tired of doing the hard thing, and I want to encourage them to do the hard thing. So once I get from my client the conceptual thing that they want me to know, then I work with them on how can we say that in a way that is super catchy and pithy. And so he works through those 6 pillar point formulas to come up with that one. And all the others.
That's so cool. That is so cool. It creates this more concrete process. I think that so many people think that something like that particular quote is just, it just drops from the sky, or it's just a brilliant idea. And it's, oh, that's a great idea. Let's put it on a t-shirt. But there's a process and a formula that it makes it attainable and achievable and repeatable for everyone, which is so cool.
I think that is the beauty of the way we do business. And I'm going to break it down in a little bit of a story. One thing I know and love about Rory Vaden is that when he has a gap in his own understanding, he seeks to fill it. And he doesn't just fill it so that he can now not have that gap. He fills it and then wants to teach everybody else how he did it. So as an example, when he was in his teens, he knew he wanted to be a motivational speaker. And it's very rare that somebody who has the charisma to command an audience from a stage is also like a techie data nerd. But Rory is such a techie data nerd. What he did is he dissected 3,000 hours of the top performing talks. to really figure out what made them top performing talks. And he made a spreadsheet. And one of the things he learned is that they used humor. And he was like, oh, that's not good because I'm not funny. So he learned how to be funny. He made it his mission. I'm going to learn everything there is about humor. He did stand-up comedy. He read books. He wrote his first book in his early 20s, and that book is called How to Be Funny to Make Mo Money. And so that's his MO. He had a gap. He went and filled it, and then he wrote a book to help everybody else. And that's really what Brand Builders Group is. It took him 12 years to get his personal brand to where it is, and we've systematized it. We've broken it down so that it's a process that absolutely anybody can do, and they don't have to go learn it the hard way and have it take 12 years like it took him.
That is music to my ears. I am such a fan of systems and processes and all of the things, especially when it's something that delivers what could feel like very abstract or difficult concepts. That's magic to me. I think that is so cool. That is so cool.
People don't really, it's counterintuitive to think that something that is conceptual and maybe even ethereal can be systematized. But that's really what we've done is we've systematized almost all of that thing that really is hard to pinpoint.
That's so good. I'm nerding out right now. So hard. So can you talk a little bit about what would you consider to be the hallmarks of a really successful personal brand?
Not only are they clear on their thought leadership, but they have a strategy for gaining exposure. And so not everybody who's building a personal brand wants to be a speaker on a stage. Not everybody wants to write a book. Not everybody wants to host a podcast. But which is the avenue that is going to be the best fit for you to gain that exposure? Social media is one way, but we know that getting in front of people is the thing that drives the business. People want to do business with you when they've heard you, when they've seen you. And so gaining exposure, just being out there, spreading your wisdom, that's the best attraction factor there is. So what are your exposure plays? What makes the most sense to you? Once you've dialed in that content, you're clear on your thought leadership. Does it make sense to either host a podcast or go on a podcast tour, get on stages or speak for free? Just do webinars, do the things that kind of let people in on what it is you know. Or is it to write a book? So we've actually helped 60 authors hit bestseller lists.
60.
60.
My gosh, that is incredible. And I'm sure there are all of the systems and processes for that as well.
That's right. It is a systematic thing. It is not called the best written book. It's called the best selling book. And so it is all about how can we leverage those exposure plays in order to get people to love you, love your message, and want to have more of that, which is the book in that case.
That is beautiful. Many people that I've spoken with have this conception that exposure equals social media. So can you talk a little bit about what the role of social media is in some of these exposure plays and how you would encourage people to use social media?
Absolutely. So we want social media because we don't own any platform. And I don't know if you know anybody who's learned that the hard way, but I've definitely had clients who, for some reason that they don't understand, had their profile shut down. And they did have their revenue attached to that platform. So that meant a loss of thousands of dollars. So we love social media, but we want you to think of social media in the proper context. We don't want you to build your empire on rented real estate. So we want the social media to be catching attention and driving people to the thing you own. And what you own is your website. Now, we don't want to drive them to your website homepage because that's counting on a behavior of them to spend enough time to search through your website and learn that they like you. And that's just requiring too much of them. So we want to drive people to the repository of all your good stuff, all of your thought leadership, which in our estimation is your blog. Now, a lot of people go, wait a minute, I'm not a writer. Are you telling me I have to become a writer? You do not need to be a writer. Here's one way you could do it. If you wanted to make a 5-minute video and you had that video transcribed, the transcription could become your blog. So in that case, the video is your source. And that's the way we started out. But now our podcast is our source. So we'll do a podcast episode like you're doing now. We would have that podcast transcribed, edited to have the best nuggets in a blog format. Our podcast page on Brand Builders Group is written so that the transcription is there, but social media teased that content, drove people to that thing that we own. And now that they're there, we have lead magnets and funnels. Let's talk about the ideal customer journey. You want somebody out there to be attracted to the content that you put out in your social media, and a percentage of that are going to want more. What is the more? Your blog. Like, oh my gosh, that was a great nugget. A percentage wants more. What's the more? The full length article in your blog. A percentage of the traffic that reads that is going to want more. What is the more? That's a lead magnet or a funnel that gets them into your ecosystem. Now you control that relationship. Data shows that it takes 7 touches to establish trust. So if you're hoping that people are going to find you on social media, you don't really know if they have or not. You don't really know if they've hit your website or not. So you are not in control of that customer journey. But as soon as they opt in, as soon as you have something so compelling, that percentage that wants more is getting the more, you control that relationship. Those emails that you put out with more thought leadership and offers and things that you wanted to call their attention to, those are eventually a percentage of those will convert into clients. So that's the long game of how. Now you can make money on social media just by driving those people to a free call with you. But the long game is to get to amass a group of people who want more of you. And then that value that you provide eventually converts.
Oh, that's so good. It's so good. Can you talk a little bit, because we were just talking about content, can you talk a little bit about content licensing and what role that plays in personal brands and how you can monetize?
Yeah. So as a matter of fact, we have, of the 14 different topics that we teach our clients through, finding your brand DNA is only one of them. There's also captivating content, world-class presentation craft, podcast power, as a few examples. But finding your brand DNA is actually licensable. We have found that there are so many people who are saying, hey, it would help the people that I'm serving if they knew the problem that they solve, if they knew who their avatar is. So if you have content that people are thinking, man, if I could teach this to my clients, that would be something that would help me go further, faster. That would be something that would help me serve them in a deeper way. And so you give people the opportunity to learn it and then offer it to their people for a fee. And so we have that for our Finding Your Brand DNA.
Wow, that's next level. That's really good stuff. That is really good stuff.
I love it.
Which speaks directly to the point why thought leadership is so important, because it sounds like that's where a lot of this licensed content can live, is in that thought leadership, and it comes from that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So whether people want to have a course or whether they want to just provide free content in a blog or in their social media, the way you say what you say, the way you're providing value, that really is what sets you apart.
That's fantastic. Now, you have worked with so many successful entrepreneurs. What are some of the patterns that you've seen the most successful when it comes to growth and building an audience and building a brand, cultivating a tribe? What are some of the patterns that you've seen those people display and go through?
I think most of what I see are the ingredients for success in building a personal brand is how coachable are you? How much bandwidth do you have to be able to execute on the ideas and the strategies that we're talking about? And that's because there's so many things that we could be doing. There's an infinite number of things that we could be doing. And part of the biggest reason people have success is because they know how to say no to the things that aren't the most significant thing in their journey. So we want to help people get super clear what they should be saying yes to and what they should be saying no to. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question directly. Ask it in another way.
What are some of the most common steps that you see people that have grown very successfully?
Yeah, so I'll give you that answer in a story. One of my favorite clients is a divorce attorney. And so she came to Brand Builders Group because she wanted to reduce the number of people she had to work with directly, but be the rainmaker and be the reason that people heard about her firm and driving more work to the attorneys that she had at her practice. So she was overworked because she was doing so much of the work herself. So she dove in and worked on building a personal brand. She created a course. She launched a podcast. And within 90 days, she built her social media platform. I think she started at 90 and got it to 11,000 in 90 days. And that was because she had the bandwidth to dedicate to that. Now, that was a lot of different things she was putting into play. If you don't have the bandwidth to be able to really focus on moving the needle, then we would want to scale back and work on one thing at a time. The biggest thing was she renamed her law firm, and I helped her come up with this title. I'm so excited about it. Imagine a divorce attorney whose podcast is called Happy Even After.
Ooh.
Yeah, I want to be happy after a divorce, don't you? So happy even after. And she actually renamed her law firm from Bauer Family Law to the Happy Even After Family Law, created the D course for her whole thing is about wanting to make sure that if you're going to go through a divorce, you're not being taught and told by your attorneys to go for the jugular, because you're going to have the rest of your life with this person, even though you think the divorce is ending it, especially if you have children. So how can you do that amiably? And so her course was to just help people think through that before they went all in and either felt victimized or felt like they were the perpetrator of trying to get everything they could get. So imagine coming up with something that walked people through that in a course instead of having to be on the phone delivering that yourself. So that was one thing that really helped her with her business. And then her podcast helped her gain exposure. And then what she did formulaically on her content for social media is what really drove that. It was starting with the problem she solved. If you could imagine coming up with 52 questions that your avatar would ask, every question implies a problem, or you wouldn't have the question. So start with questions and then start answering each of those questions over the course of a year, because if you did it for 52 questions, that's a different question every single week. And then you go through a formula of the problem, solution, teeing up another problem, and then having a call to action. And so that's the formula that she used and grew her social media following. It's really, again, diving into the head and the mind of the person that you're being called to serve instead of just talking at them.
Yeah, that is a powerful story, and one that I think does such a great job of illustrating a lot of these things that we've talked about. That is very cool. Yeah. So let me ask, what is something, in your opinion, that no one or maybe not enough people are talking about in the personal branding space right now that we should be talking about?
I think that we have a unique angle on social media. I think almost everybody in the personal branding space is saying that you absolutely have to increase your followers. And we want you to. We want you to increase your followers, but that is not again, we're seeing people do the right things, but in the wrong order. I would not focus on blowing up your social media following as the first thing that we do. We need to get super dialed in on the who and then the problem you solve, so that the messaging you're putting out on social media helps it grow organically, not in a forced way. I would say that's the biggest misconception about personal branding, is that it's all about the social media play. We really want to get clear on who you are and how you do what you do to come up with your thought leadership, so that can be the thing that goes viral. Your thought leadership deserves to go viral, not just stuff out there for the sake of being out there.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. And I think it's so easy to get caught up in social media because that number of followers is such an easy number to track. And so can you talk a little bit about what are some of the more important metrics when it comes to personal branding that people should be tracking when they're looking at, okay, am I even being successful? Is this even working? Obviously, you've got the bottom line number. If you're getting more clients, obviously that a lagging indicator. But what are those metrics that we could be following along the way to say, I think we're on the right track?
Good question. I think we should think of every endeavor, including social media, with the end in mind. What is the point of social media? It's not just to be known, it's to convert into more clients. And so if we are able to say how many of those clients, how many of the people on social media want more? How many people are we able to convert from my hoping that they see me to wanting to be in my email list, wanting to have something so compelling that they're opting in? And so I would say that one of the best measures is that conversion from randomly catching them to them actually saying they want more. There's also a formula for turning social media engagement into a client. And so we call that strategy the 4 F's. It's how could you, so it truly acts like a funnel, but nobody would feel like it's a funnel unless they are engaged in every step of the process. So the first question would be, if anybody makes a comment on anything, is to be able to DM them and say, what was your favorite part? So that's one of the 4 F's. Get them to talk about your content. And if they don't answer, then it doesn't go any further. But if they say, oh, my favorite part was this, then you get to ask, no, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. The first part is how did you find me? Sorry. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you like that. Just curious, how did you first stumble upon this? So how did you find me? Then what is your favorite part? Then future, what are you working on? What are you doing? What are your goals? And then free call. So again, it's how did you find me? What are you resonating with? What's your favorite part? What's your future? What's going on that you have a goal about? And then I think I could help you with that. So let's get on a call and talk about it. So if they don't go through that, then they're never feeling sold to. But if they keep engaging, it could turn that social media contact, somebody who's seeing and loving your content, into an actual client.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. So let me ask, AI is a big thing that a lot of people are talking about lately. What are some of the coolest uses that you've seen in terms of growing a personal brand and doing the work that you do?
Oh my gosh, I love using AI. And honestly, it has helped us be able to create messaging that is so on point. First of all, I want to train my ChatGPT to know me. So there are 2 things that you can do to customize your ChatGPT so that it really is responding in the way that is most aligned with what you're trying to put out into the world. But a specific example I'll give you is I have a lot of speakers and they want to create a speaking kit, a speaking guide, a media guide that they're going to send to a prospective person who might hire them as a speaker. So they have the title of their keynote and they want to write a program description. Another word for that is a program bio. In other words, this is what my keynote is about. And so I've worked with the client to come up with pillars. That's tell a story, make a point, teach a framework, and inspire behavior. Their keynote is about 1 or 2 of those pillars. I might put that into ChatGPT and say, hey, in my keynote, I tell a story about this and just give it a 1 line, like the time the dog ate my homework. And then I share this point that goes like this. I teach a framework and then I inspire this behavior. So tell me what this keynote is about. And so it writes a program description. Then I ask, what are 5 one-word problems that this keynote solves? And then I pick the one that resonates the most with my brand positioning statement that I came up with when I did my Finding My Brand DNA work. And I say, rewrite that program description to establish that one-word problem and position my keynote as the solution to that problem. And so that program description is using the psychology of influence. Imagine being a meeting planner and not just reading, my keynote's going to help you do blah, 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 but instead saying, hey, there's this problem and my keynote's going to solve that problem. And then the last prompt I give ChatGPT is, what are 5 audience takeaways? Now that I know that this keynote solves this problem, what are 5 things that my audience would walk away with? So typically when we're writing their speaker kit, we come up with that program description, we help with the title, and we come up with those 5 audience takeaways. So I love AI for that reason. It has just really streamlined that process, and it still takes it takes your brain, it takes your strategy, but it helps with that in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, that's so cool. I use it so much for ideation and just helping me to articulate what I'm trying to articulate, which a lot of what we're talking about is branding and trying to do that same thing.
Yes.
So that's so cool. Yeah, it's such a fantastic tool. I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us.
You bet.
So let me ask you, Kristen, what would you consider to be your superpower?
My uniqueness is imagination. I think that as we're going about our business, we focus on the evidence of what is. And when I truly believe that we give the universe the building blocks to create our future with, and if we're only giving thought to what is, and typically if we're giving thought to what is, we're thinking about the things that we don't like. We're thinking about the things that ticked us off. We're thinking about the things that went wrong. That's what occupies most of our brains. So if that's what I'm thinking about, then I'm actually giving the universe those building blocks to create my future with. I'm not spending any time thinking about the way I would rather it be. Einstein gave an amazing quote when he said, imagination is everything. It's the preview to life's coming attractions. So why not level the playing field and create a practice where you're imagining what could be, because that's giving the universe the building blocks of more of what you really want.
That, by the way, is a topic that I think we could have a whole other podcast episode on, because it's one of my favorites and it's so important. I think it's so powerful, but that's a beautiful way to sum that up. Gosh.
I hope we do get that second chance, because outside of Brand Builders Group, I have my own personal brand, and it is one-on-one coaching to help people understand their limitations and learn how to retrain their mind in order to break through those.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to take that as we have a standing appointment. We are going to have another episode about that, because I have to hear all of the things. A very good friend of mine, she and I are total nerds when it comes to quantum leaping and building out manifestation and things like that. And so I would love to visit with you about that. I'm geeking out about that too. So that's so good. Let me ask you, what's your definition of success, Kristen?
Oh my gosh. To me, the definition of success is self-love. The ability to love myself is the degree to which I can experience happiness and joy. And typically what holds us back from that self-love is a projection. It's judgment of others. Because every time we judge others, we're missing the opportunity to see that thing that's pushing my buttons is actually a mirror. And if I didn't have a pushable button, I would not be upset. So everything that pushes your buttons is like an opportunity to learn and grow. So success is when you have fewer buttons, when you're so in love with who you are that you just aren't shakeable.
That is powerful. That is powerful. Oh, there's a whole lot of unpacking to do in that, but my gosh, that's so good. That is so good. And let me ask you this. If you could go back and teach yourself 3 pieces of advice when you were just starting out on your journey to become the person you are today, what would they be?
I'm going to share with you something that someone asked my mom a question. My sister, my mom, and I were at outside at a restaurant or something, and whenever we got together, we would just laugh with wild abandon. And people would be looking at us like, how are they bubbling so much joy? And a woman came up to her and said, I love witnessing the relationship that you have with your daughters. And it brings me joy, but at the same time, it brings me pain because I don't have that kind of relationship with my daughter. And I just wanted to know, how did you do this? And she thought, and she said, I try and practice this. Let everything I think, let everything I say, let everything I do be out of love. And I learned that at an early age. So I do look back at that little girl me, and I'm thankful for that lesson. But you asked for 3. Another thing that I would tell my younger self is don't be so hung up on the shoulds, because when you're in your zone, when you're in your element, doors open for you. So if you understand about manifestation and taking quantum leaps, what I wish my younger self knew is that the more you're caught up in the shoulds, the less you're honoring the natural flow of what your soul is being called to do. Just, there are no shoulds. Just go with what you're being shown and led to do. And I think that it would be back to love everything and everybody, because there is life in everything and it deserves to be honored. So honor the consciousness of everything, and it'll just, that living in gratitude changes everything. So I think I've been a person who knows how to do that, but wouldn't it be cool to tell my little girl self that? Like, just don't let anybody bum you out. Just stay in gratitude. That would be a great lesson to learn earlier.
Oh, that is beautiful. Absolutely. I cannot tell you how much I love that. That's incredible.
Good.
So can you tell us, what's the thing that brings you the most passion, or what's the next goal that you'd like to achieve at this point in your life?
Oh my gosh. So I challenged myself to apply for a TED Talk. And so I haven't yet submitted an application, but I have somebody who is actually a brand builder group strategist who used to work for TED Talk of Seattle. And then she worked with Microsoft, helping a lot of their leaders get TED Talks. So she and I are going to work closely together to try and get me out of my own fear of putting myself out there and do a little bit more of that.
That is remarkable. I look forward to hearing that TED Talk. Everyone who gets a chance to hear that, they are very lucky, because my gosh, just this time that we spent together has been so fantastic. And it's just filled me up so much. And so I want to thank you for taking the time and sharing with us today.
Thank you so much too. Hey, I have one more thing to share because it's outside of the box. But it just hit me when you said that. What was one goal? I'm in an all-female rock and roll band. And so that's my outlet for my joy, is just to get out there and sing. And one of our videos went viral. It's got 1.5 million views. No, 1.5 million views. Let me say it. And so we should put that in the show notes too, because I think people would get a kick out of seeing it.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see that. That is so cool. Again, another topic that we've got to talk about. I'm a big music person. That was what I did in my former life. I taught high school band, and I'm a musician, and I do all of those things. So we definitely have to chat about that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got lots of stuff to chat about, Kristen, you and I.
We do.
Final question for you. First, I just want to thank you for being so generous with your time and with your information and experience. How can we give back to you right now? What types of connections or resources are you currently looking for?
I would say that if what we talked about resonates with your listeners at all, they might be curious as to whether personal branding could be a fit for them or not. And so I would offer a free brand strategy session. So they could go to www.freebrandcall.com/KH for that, Kristen Hartnagel. And then they could have a call and just explore. So that would be my gift to you. And it's just been such a joy to spend time with you again, Kendall.
Likewise, we'll definitely put that link in the show notes as well. Thank you for being so generous and just leading with value. But yes, thank you so much, Kristen. This has been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure too.
Excellent. We will definitely have you back on and talk about all things manifestation and rock bands and all of the things.
Good.
So thank you so much. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care.
Thanks, Kendall. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey there, brand fan. If these insider strategies on building influence and cultivating real community got your wheels turning, like and subscribe for more conversations that cut through the noise and get to what really works. And if you're ready to turn these insights into action, head over to onlybrandfans.com to unlock the next level. Until next time, build something they can't ignore.